It was a bustling Tuesday afternoon in the heart of Manhattan. The streets were alive with the rhythmic symphony of honking horns, hurried footsteps, and the occasional chatter of street vendors hawking their wares. Among the crowd, a well-dressed businessman named Michael Reeves stood out. With his perfectly tailored suit, polished shoes, and an air of confidence, he was the embodiment of corporate success. Michael had just wrapped up an important meeting, one that secured him a multi-million-dollar deal. He was on top of the world, ready to celebrate with a hearty meal. He decided to stop by a new, upscale restaurant that had recently opened on Fifth Avenue. The place was famed for its gourmet dishes and luxurious ambiance. As Michael walked in, the soft murmur of conversation and the clinking of fine china filled the air. A server guided him to a table by the window, where the view of the bustling cityscape was as breathtaking as the restaurant's interior. The menu was extravagant, with dishes boasting exotic ingredients and prices to match. Michael ordered their signature dish, a truffle-infused steak paired with a glass of aged red wine. As he waited for his meal, he scrolled through his phone, responding to emails and basking in the success of his deal. Life, he thought, couldn't be better. Outside, the scene was starkly different. A young boy, no older than 10, lingered near the restaurant's large glass windows. His clothes were tattered and his face smudged with dirt. His hollow cheeks and sunken eyes told a story of hunger and hardship. The boy, who went by the name Ethan, had been living on the streets for months after losing his parents in a tragic accident. With no relatives to turn to, he relied on the kindness of strangers and whatever scraps he could find to survive. Ethan's stomach growled as he peered through the window, his gaze fixed on the elegant plates of food being served. He watched as patrons laughed and dined, oblivious to the struggles of the outside world. But what caught his eye was the plate being brought to Michael's table, a steaming steak, glistening with truffle oil, accompanied by an array of colorful sides. As Michael picked up his fork and knife, ready to take the first bite, Ethan's instincts kicked in. He sprinted into the restaurant, ignoring the startled glances and murmurs from the other diners. "Don't eat this!" he shouted, his voice cracking with desperation. All heads turned toward the commotion, and Michael froze, his fork hovering mid-air. The boy's words hung in the air like a thunderclap, leaving the entire restaurant in stunned silence. Ethan's eyes were wide with urgency as he looked directly at Michael, his small frame trembling with a mixture of fear and determination. For a moment, time seemed to stand still. What could possibly compel a young boy to burst into such a place, disrupting the polished tranquility? Michael slowly lowered his fork, his sharp features etched with confusion and curiosity. "What's going on, kid?" he asked, his voice calm but firm. The restaurant manager rushed over, ready to escort Ethan out, but Michael raised a hand, signaling him to stop. Ethan hesitated, glancing at the other diners who were whispering among themselves, their expressions ranging from pity to annoyance. Gathering his courage, he finally spoke. "That food, it's dangerous," he stammered, his voice barely above a whisper. Michael's brows furrowed. "Dangerous? What are you talking about?" The boy took a deep breath, his small fists clenched at his sides. "Please, just trust me. Don't eat it." The room buzzed with murmurs as the diners exchanged puzzled glances. Michael, still skeptical, but intrigued, set his utensils down and leaned forward. "All right, kid. You've got my attention. Explain." Ethan swallowed hard, his gaze fixed on the plate. "I can't explain it here, not in front of everyone, but please believe me, it's important." Michael studied the boy for a moment, his sharp business instincts telling him there was more to this story than met the eye. Against his better judgment, he nodded. "Okay, let's talk outside." Ethan's face lit up with relief as Michael stood, leaving his untouched plate behind. As they exited the restaurant, the curious stares of the patrons followed them. Outside, the boy began to unravel a tale so unexpected that it would change Michael's life forever. Outside the luxurious restaurant, the sounds of the city enveloped them. Michael leaned against a sleek black lamppost, his arms crossed, while Ethan stood nervously, fidgeting with the hem of his tattered shirt. The stark contrast between the two, Michael's polished appearance and Ethan's worn-out look, was impossible to ignore. "All right, kid," Michael said, his tone both patient and skeptical. "We're outside. Start talking. Why on earth would you rush in like that and tell me not to eat my food?" Ethan looked up at him, his eyes filled with a mixture of fear and urgency. "I know it sounds crazy, but I had to stop you. That food, it's poisoned." Michael blinked, momentarily taken aback. "Poisoned? By whom? And how would you even know that?" Ethan hesitated, his face turning pale. He glanced around as if searching for someone or something, then took a step closer to Michael. "I've been hanging around the back of that restaurant," he confessed. "I saw one of the kitchen workers arguing with someone earlier. They were whispering about getting rid of someone. I didn't think much of it until I saw you get served that dish." Michael's brows knit together, suspicion creeping into his mind. "And you think they meant me?" Ethan nodded vigorously. The worker kept looking out front, like they were waiting for someone important to come in. When you showed up, they stopped arguing, and one of them rushed to the kitchen. I overheard them say, 'It's ready.'" Michael rubbed his temple, his rational side warring with the unsettling feeling in his gut. "You're telling me someone's trying to poison me? That sounds like a plot straight out of a crime drama, kid." Ethan looked down, his thin frame trembling slightly. "I know it's hard to believe, but I've seen people do awful things when they're desperate. Please, Mr. Reeves, I'm not lying." Michael sighed, glancing back toward the restaurant. From where they stood, he could see his untouched plate sitting on the table through the large glass windows. He considered the boy's words carefully. Ethan's eyes were honest, and his demeanor carried a sense of genuine concern that couldn't be faked. "All right," Michael said finally. "Let's assume for a moment that you're telling the truth. Why risk rushing in to warn me? Why not just call the police?" Ethan shrugged, his eyes tearing up. "Because I've seen too many people ignore kids like me. I figured if I didn't do something, no one else would. And you look like someone who could help me." Michael's chest tightened at the boy's raw honesty. For a moment, he saw past the dirt and grime to the vulnerable, determined child underneath. "Okay, Ethan," he said softly. "I believe you." Ethan's eyes widened in surprise. You do?" Michael nodded. "Let's go back inside and get to the bottom of this. Together." Ethan hesitated, glancing nervously at the restaurant. "Are you sure? What if—" Michael placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "I've dealt with my fair share of tough situations, kid. If someone's really trying to hurt me, they've picked the wrong person to mess with." The two walked back into the restaurant, their presence immediately drawing attention. Michael approached the manager, who looked flustered, but greeted him politely. "Sir, is everything all right? Shall I have your food reheated?" the manager asked. Michael shook his head, his expression serious. "I need to speak with your kitchen staff, now." The manager blinked, caught off guard. "I'm not sure that's—" "Now," Michael repeated firmly, his tone leaving no room for argument. Sensing the gravity of the situation, the manager reluctantly led Michael and Ethan toward the kitchen. As they entered, the bustling sounds of clanging pots and sizzling pans filled the air. The staff froze mid-motion, their eyes darting toward the unexpected guests. Michael scanned the room, his sharp gaze taking in every detail. He noticed two employees whispering near the back, their expressions tense. One of them, a wiry man with a tattoo peeking out from under his sleeve, glanced up and froze when he saw Michael. "That's him," Ethan whispered, pointing at the man. "He's the one I saw arguing earlier." Michael stepped forward, his presence commanding. "You," he said, locking eyes with the man. "We need to talk." The room went silent, the tension thick enough to cut with a knife. The truth was about to come out, and what they uncovered would shock everyone involved. The kitchen staff stood frozen, their eyes darting between Michael and the wiry man Ethan had pointed out. The man, who introduced himself hesitantly as Carlos, looked visibly shaken. His hands fidgeted nervously as Michael stepped closer, his voice calm but firm. Carlos, I need some answers, Michael began. This boy claims to have overheard something that could jeopardize your reputation, and maybe more. Care to explain? Carlos swallowed hard, his eyes avoiding direct contact. I don't know what you're talking about, he muttered, but the tremor in his voice betrayed him. Ethan, emboldened by Michael's presence, spoke up. I saw you arguing in the alley earlier. You said something about getting rid of someone. Then, when Mr. Reeves showed up, you rushed to the kitchen. Carlos's face turned pale, and beads of sweat began to form on his forehead. Look, kid, you don't know what you're saying. You're just a street rat. Enough, Michael interrupted, his tone sharp. Ethan has more integrity than most people I know, and right now, I believe him more than I believe you. If you're innocent, prove it. The manager, who had been standing awkwardly near the door, interjected. Carlos, is there something I should know? We run a respectable establishment here, and this kind of behavior is unacceptable. Carlos looked cornered, his eyes darting toward another kitchen worker, a woman named Maria. She avoided his gaze, her hands gripping the edge of the counter tightly. Sensing her unease, Michael turned to her. Maria, he said gently, if there's something going on, now's the time to speak up. Whatever it is, we can sort it out. Maria's lips quivered, and she glanced at Carlos, who shook his head subtly, warning her to stay silent. But Michael noticed the gesture and stepped closer to Maria, lowering his voice. You don't have to be afraid. If someone's pressuring you to do something wrong, I'll make sure you're protected. Tears welled up in Maria's eyes as she finally broke down. It wasn't my idea, she blurted out. Carlos made me do it. He said we needed the money. Michael's eyes narrowed. The money? What are you talking about? Carlos groaned, realizing the truth was slipping out. You weren't supposed to find out, he muttered angrily. It was supposed to be a simple job. Someone paid me to mess with your food, just enough to get you sick, nothing lethal. They wanted to send a message. A message? Michael's voice was steely. Who paid you? Carlos hesitated, his hands trembling. I don't know his name. He just said he works for one of your competitors. He handed me cash and said to make sure you'd regret dining here tonight. The room fell silent as the weight of Carlos's confession sank in. The staff looked horrified, and the manager's face turned beet red with anger. You've tarnished this restaurant's reputation, the manager hissed at Carlos. You've jeopardized the safety of our guests. You're fired, effective immediately. Carlos glared at the manager but said nothing, knowing his actions had caught up with him. Michael, however, wasn't done. This isn't just about your job, Carlos. What you've done is a crime. You endangered lives for money. You'll have to answer for this. Carlos's shoulders slumped as security was called to escort him out. Maria, still trembling, apologized profusely to Michael. I'm so sorry, she said. I didn't know how to say no. Please forgive me. Michael nodded, his voice softening. I believe you were coerced, Maria, but this is a serious matter and there will be consequences. Learn from this and never let anyone pressure you into doing something wrong again. Turning to Ethan, Michael knelt down and placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. You did the right thing, kid. You stopped something terrible from happening tonight. I owe you my gratitude. Ethan's face lit up, a mixture of relief and pride washing over him. I just wanted to help, he said quietly. Michael smiled. And you did more than that. You showed courage when it mattered most. The restaurant buzzed with whispers as news of the incident spread among the diners. Michael decided to stay and finish his meal, this time ensuring it was prepared safely. As he sat down, he invited Ethan to join him, offering the boy his first proper meal in weeks. By the end of the night, Michael had not only resolved a dangerous situation, but also changed a young boy's life. Ethan's bravery had proven that even the smallest voices can make a big difference, and Michael was determined to help the boy find a better future. The next day, the events of the previous night spread like wildfire. News outlets picked up the story of how a homeless boy, Ethan, had exposed a dangerous plot at a high-end restaurant, saving not just a billionaire, but countless others from potential harm. Social media was abuzz, with hashtags like Courage of a Child and Heroic Boy trending. Michael Reeves, who rarely spoke about personal matters publicly, decided to share his experience in a heartfelt post on his social media accounts. He praised Ethan's bravery, calling him a hero in every sense of the word, and urged people to recognize that true strength often comes from the most unexpected places. The post went viral within hours. Thousands of comments poured in, applauding Ethan's courage and condemning the actions of Carlos and the unnamed competitor who had orchestrated the scheme. Many offered to help Ethan, wanting to contribute to a brighter future for him. Meanwhile, Michael wasn't content with just public recognition. He began making arrangements to provide Ethan with the support he needed. He reached out to trusted contacts in various organizations, securing a safe place for Ethan to live and enrolling him in a local school. Later that week, Michael invited Ethan to his office, where the boy sat nervously in a chair much too big for him. Michael handed him an envelope and smiled warmly. "This," Michael said, "is a scholarship fund in your name. It'll cover your education, housing, and anything else you might need until you're ready to stand on your own." Ethan's eyes widened as he opened the envelope, seeing the hefty sum Michael had allocated for his future. I don't know what to say," Ethan stammered, his voice choked with emotion. "Just promise me one thing," Michael said, leaning forward. "When you're in a position to help someone else, do it without hesitation, just like you helped me." Tears streamed down Ethan's face as he nodded. "I promise." The restaurant where the incident had occurred also made headlines. The management, eager to repair their tarnished reputation, implemented strict background checks for all employees and revamped their security measures. They publicly apologized to Michael and the patrons who had been present that night. Carlos, on the other hand, faced legal repercussions for his actions. Authorities launched an investigation into the competitor who had hired him, with Michael's legal team determined to hold everyone involved accountable. Ethan's life changed drastically over the following months. With a safe home, consistent meals, and access to education, he began to thrive. He quickly became a symbol of hope and resilience in his community, inspiring others to take action when they saw injustice. Michael kept in touch with Ethan, occasionally meeting him for lunch or inviting him to events. Their bond grew stronger, built on mutual respect and gratitude. Years later, Ethan, now a young man with a college degree, stood on a stage at a charity gala organized by Michael. The event aimed to support homeless youth, and Ethan was the keynote speaker. As he spoke, his voice steady and confident, he shared his story. "That night I wasn't sure anyone would listen to me, but Michael did. He saw potential in me when I didn't see it in myself, and because of him, I'm standing here today, ready to pay it forward." The audience erupted in applause, many moved to tears. Michael, sitting in the front row, smiled proudly, knowing that the boy who had once been homeless had grown into a man who would change the world in his own way. Ethan's journey became a testament to the power of kindness, courage, and second chances. And it all began with a simple shout of warning, a moment that proved even the smallest voices can create ripples that change lives forever.